What if Tom Hiddleston, the man we all know as Loki, had actually played Thor? That almost happened. Before becoming the God of Mischief, Hiddleston originally auditioned to be the God of Thunder. But what if Marvel had gone with that choice? Let's break down how the entire MCU could have changed. A Shakespearean and tactical Thor. Chris Hemsworth's Thor is a powerful, boisterous warrior with a larger-than-life personality. But Hiddleston, trained in Shakespearean theater, would have likely portrayed a more noble and poetic Thor, less about brute strength and more about wisdom and tactics. Imagine a Thor who approaches battle with strategic finesse rather than just throwing Mjolnir at everything. His speeches would have been more dramatic, his leadership more diplomatic, and his fights more about agility than raw power. Would this have made Thor a stronger ruler for Asgard? Maybe. But would he have had the same fun, comedic presence? Probably not. For those of you who have already subscribed over the last couple of months, thank you guys so much. We've been gaining subscribers here at Maxiverse Twist, and if you have not already, I also noticed that 99.6% is watching in this channel have not yet subscribed already. I would just kindly invite you to do so. It's like the #1 thing you can do to support me as a content creator in the channel. And of course, you gotta be subbed to see more latest updated videos. Tom Hiddleston had just arrived on Broadway, earning glowing reviews for his play. But before stepping into the theater, he took a walk through Times Square, where he happened to run into some familiar faces. Well, at least they resembled his Avengers co-stars. At first, he wasn't sure if it was really them, but upon closer inspection, especially spotting Tom Holland's exposed thumb poking through his Spider-Man glove, it became clear. Holland, ever the dedicated Spider-Man, apparently traveled everywhere with that suit. As exciting as Broadway was, there was another major milestone in Tom's career, his very own Disney Plus show, Loki. He could hardly believe it. When he auditioned for Thor back in 2009, the Marvel Cinematic Universe had only just begun with Iron Man. At the time, he had no idea he was stepping into what would become a global phenomenon. He simply thought he was trying out for an interesting role in an interesting movie. The idea of getting his own series was beyond anything he had imagined. Of course, Marvel was famously secretive, so there wasn't much he could reveal about the upcoming show. But one fun fact he shared backstage: he never actually auditioned for Loki. He had originally tried out for the role of Thor. At the time, Marvel wanted relatively unknown actors, so the audience wouldn't associate them with previous roles. The casting call was simple. If you were over 6 feet tall and had blonde hair, you got a shot at Thor. For 3 months, Tom was in the running. For a brief moment, he even thought he had a real chance of wielding Mjolnir. Then, in a surprise moment, the host revealed that Marvel had sent over his original audition footage. The crowd erupted with laughter and cheers as they watched a younger Hiddleston, hammer in hand, delivering his best God of Thunder performance. Even he had to admit it was for the best that Chris Hemsworth got the part. Promote your brand, product, or service with Maxiverse Twist. Are you looking for an affordable way to advertise your business? Look no further. At Maxiverse Twist, we offer 30 to 60-second ad placements within our video, starting at just $80. Here's how it works. Email us your ad video, up to 1 minute in length, at clovermaxi@gmail.com. Once your submission is reviewed and approved, we'll provide you with the payment details, PayPal only. After payment confirmation, your ad will be featured starting at the 3-minute mark in one of our upcoming videos. Why choose Maxiverse Twist? Your ad will reach an estimated 1.6K to 8.8K views within the first month. Quick turnaround. Your video will be uploaded within 1 week of payment confirmation. Don't miss this opportunity to boost your visibility. Contact us now to get started. Switching gears, Tom talked about Betrayal, the play he was starring in on Broadway. With just 2 weeks left in its run, he reflected on the 220 performances he and his castmates had already done. He played Robert, a publisher whose wife was having an affair with his best friend. The play, a Harold Pinter masterpiece, told the story in reverse order: intense, emotional, and, surprisingly, darkly funny. Performing 8 shows a week, he had to summon real emotions every time, including crying on cue. That led to a challenge. Could he cry on command? The host, Jimmy Fallon, jokingly set the scene, pretending to be emotional about Baby Yoda's cuteness. Without missing a beat, Tom dove into the moment, his voice breaking as he confessed, "The thing about Baby Yoda is that I just love him. It was a masterclass in acting." The audience roared with laughter and applause. One more unforgettable moment in the ever-entertaining career of Tom Hiddleston. A different Loki, and maybe a different villain dynamic. If Hiddleston played Thor, then someone else would have been Loki. But who? Marvel might have gone for a darker, more sinister Loki, maybe someone like Benedict Cumberbatch or Matt Smith. This would have completely changed the dynamic between Thor and Loki. Instead of the playful, mischievous trickster we got, Loki might have been a more intimidating and ruthless villain. And without Hiddleston's chemistry with Hemsworth, would the brotherly rivalry have been as compelling? And let's not forget, Loki was so beloved that he got his own Disney Plus series. Would that even exist in this timeline? A more serious Thor. Ragnarok. One of the biggest turning points for Thor was Thor. Ragnarok. Director Taika Waititi turned the character into a comedic powerhouse, leaning into Hemsworth's natural charisma and humor. But with Hiddleston as Thor, that might not have worked. His style leans more toward dry wit than slapstick humor. Instead of a goofy, fun-loving Thor, we might have gotten a more dramatic and emotional take on the character. A different Avengers. Endgame Arc 1 of Thor's most unexpected transformations came in Avengers. Endgame, where we saw him as an out-of-shape, depressed god struggling with his failures. Now, picture that moment with Tom Hiddleston's version of Thor. Would he have turned to self-destruction, or would he have handled his grief in a more brooding, poetic way? Instead of fat Thor, we might have gotten a more tormented, guilt-ridden king, perhaps closer to Shakespeare's Hamlet. Would that have made Endgame more emotional, or just less fun? Would the MCU be better or worse? Chris Hemsworth's Thor has become one of the MCU's most iconic characters. He evolved from a serious warrior to a lovable, self-aware hero who embraces both strength and humor. But with Tom Hiddleston in the role, the MCU would have taken a different path, one with more elegance, strategy, and maybe less comedy. If Tom Hiddleston had played Thor instead of Loki, the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe could have looked very different. Here are some fun fan theories and alternate scenarios that could have happened. 1. A more Shakespearean and charismatic Thor. Hiddleston originally auditioned for Thor, and his background in theater could have made Thor more of an elegant, poetic, and dramatic hero rather than Chris Hemsworth's brash, comedic take. Instead of a loud, boisterous warrior, this version of Thor might have been more refined, like a noble prince with a deep sense of duty. 2. Chris Hemsworth as Loki? If Hiddleston was cast as Thor, Marvel might have considered Chris Hemsworth for Loki. A more physically imposing Loki could have changed their dynamic, making him more of a tragic fallen hero rather than a sneaky trickster. Hemsworth's mischievous side, seen in Ragnarok, could have worked for a more chaotic, unpredictable Loki. 3. Thor's character, arc, would be more tragic. With Hiddleston's acting strengths, Thor's journey might have been darker and more emotional. Imagine a Shakespearean tragedy-style fall from grace, where Odin's expectations weigh heavier on Thor. This could have shifted his rivalry with Loki into something more intimate, maybe even reversing their fates, where Thor becomes the outcast instead.
4.
The Avengers would have had a more intellectual Thor. Hiddleston's Thor might have been less of a brute force warrior and more of a strategic thinker, contributing to plans alongside Tony Stark and Bruce Banner. Instead of the strongest Avenger jokes, his intelligence and wisdom could have made him a tactical leader.
5.
The Loki we know might not exist. Without Hiddleston's performance, Loki might not have become as iconic as he is today. A different actor might have played him in a more generic villainous way, meaning no massive Loki fandom, no redemption arc, and possibly no Loki TV series. 6. Ragnarok would have been a different movie. Taika Waititi's comedic tone in Thor. Ragnarok worked because of Hemsworth's natural humor. If Hiddleston had been Thor, the film might have taken a more dramatic approach, possibly resembling a Norse epic rather than a comedy. 7. The Infinity War death scene would have hit even harder. If Loki had been played by someone else, and Thor was Hiddleston, then Thor's confrontation with Thanos in Infinity War could have been even more heartbreaking. Imagine a more tragic and poetic moment as Thor loses everything, including Asgard, his brother, and his people, delivered with Hiddleston's emotional depth. Interactive endings. What if Tom Hiddleston played Thor? If Marvel explored an interactive what if scenario where Tom Hiddleston played Thor instead of Loki? Here are some branching storylines that could unfold based on different choices. 1. Thor embraces his Shakespearean roots choice. A. Thor, played by Hiddleston, is more diplomatic and wise, leading Asgard into an era of peace rather than war. Choice B. He remains a tragic prince, struggling with Odin's expectations, and falls into self-doubt, ultimately leading to Loki, played by Hemsworth, usurping the throne. 2. Loki's role swap choice. A. Loki Hemsworth fully embraces his villainous nature, becoming an even greater threat than Thanos. Choice. B. Loki becomes a sympathetic anti-hero, torn between loyalty to his brother and his hunger for power. 3. Avengers dynamic shift choice. A. Hiddleston's Thor becomes a more strategic and diplomatic leader of the Avengers. Choice. B. Without Hemsworth's comedic presence, the team's chemistry changes, leading to a darker Avengers dynamic. 4. Ragnarok's tone changes. Choice. A. Ragnarok is a Norse tragedy where Thor loses everything in a dramatic, emotional downfall. Choice. B. The movie keeps its comedic tone, but with Hiddleston's Thor being more of a sarcastic, witty ruler, similar to Loki's personality. If Tom Hiddleston had played Thor, crossover stories with other franchises could lead to some wild alternate endings. Here are a few possibilities. 1. Thor joins the Game of Thrones universe. With Hiddleston's Shakespearean acting style, his Thor could fit perfectly into Westeros. Ending A. Thor allies with the Starks, using Mjolnir to defeat the White Walkers alongside Jon Snow. Ending B. He is manipulated by Cersei and becomes her champion in a war against Daenerys. 2. Loki, Chris Hemsworth, becomes a Sith Lord. Star Wars crossover. Ending A. As an alternate version of Loki, Hemsworth wields a double-bladed red lightsaber, ruling the Sith Empire. Ending B. Thor, Hiddleston, becomes a Jedi Knight, using his godly powers to wield the Force and challenge Darth Vader. 3. Thor, in DC's Justice League ending. A. Hiddleston's Thor teams up with Wonder Woman as a fellow godly warrior, forging a new alliance between Asgard and Themyscira. Ending B. Loki, Hemsworth, manipulates Superman, causing a civil war between Asgard and Krypton. 4. Thor, in Harry Potter's Wizarding World ending. A. Thor teaches at Hogwarts, using Mjolnir to channel magical lightning. Ending B. Loki Hemsworth becomes a new Dark Lord, challenging Voldemort for supremacy. 5. Thor in the Pirates of the Caribbean universe. Ending A. Thor joins Captain Jack Sparrow's crew, searching for the legendary Trident of Poseidon. Ending B. Loki Hemsworth betrays Jack and claims the seas for himself, becoming a new pirate king. Which crossover ending sounds the most fun? Would you want Thor versus Vader, Thor versus Superman, or Thor versus White Walkers? What fans would expect if Tom Hiddleston played Thor? If Tom Hiddleston had been cast as Thor instead of Loki, fans would have had completely different expectations for the character and the MCU. Here are some things they might have anticipated. 1. A more elegant and refined Thor fans would expect Hiddleston's Thor to be more poetic and intellectual, with a strong Shakespearean influence. His speeches would likely be more dramatic and theatrical, similar to Odin's wisdom, rather than Thor's usual brash confidence. 2. A more tragic character arc. Instead of the goofy, arrogant Thor we got, fans might have expected a more brooding, emotionally conflicted hero. The rivalry between Thor and Loki could have felt like a true Shakespearean tragedy, rather than a sibling rivalry full of witty comebacks. 3. A different type of action. Scenes fans might have expected less brute force and more precision in combat, with Thor being a tactical fighter, rather than just smashing things with Mjolnir. His fighting style could have had more agility and elegance, possibly similar to how Loki fights in the MCU. 4. A more political or strategic leader. Instead of a boisterous warrior-like king, fans might have expected a Thor who rules Asgard with strategy and intellect, engaging in diplomatic battles rather than physical ones. He could have been a philosophical ruler, dealing with power struggles rather than proving himself through battle. 5. A different chemistry. With the Avengers, fans would have expected a more reserved and sophisticated Thor in the Avengers, interacting differently with Tony Stark, Captain America, and Hulk. The Thor-Hulk bromance, like in Ragnarok, might not have happened, replaced by a more intellectual rivalry with Stark instead. 6. A darker, more emotional Ragnarok. Instead of the comedic Taika Waititi version of Thor, Ragnarok, fans might have expected a somber, epic tragedy where Asgard's fall felt truly devastating. The film could have taken a more serious tone, focusing on the weight of Thor's leadership rather than humor. Would you have preferred a dramatic, strategic Thor? Or do you think Hiddleston's strengths were better suited for Loki? That's all for today's video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe for more exciting Maxiverse twist content.